Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Premier Chelsea, your source for all things Premier League, but starting with Chelsea first. Coming to you on your speakers and headsets. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm one of your hosts, Jackie. I'm here with my two good friends, Rahul and Alex. But today we're joined by a very special guest, the rules expert for the CBS European football coverage and former FIFA referee. Welcome to the show, Christina Uncle.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is exciting.
It's absolutely an honor for us to have you on here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, anything you feel like sharing with us today.
Yeah, try not to bore anybody too much, but just long story short, at least what's relevant for this portion of the world. I, as you mentioned, past FIFA referee, representing the United States for 7 years on the international panel, which was is a big honor for me to be able to do that. But I had been refereeing international soccer. The women's side's a little bit different than the men's side, although it's changing quite a bit for over 10 years. And started officiating when I was 10 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, which a lot of people probably, if you read a little bit, it's because I was yelling at the referees. Go figure. My coach was a ref. He made me take the ref course when I was 10, or he told me I couldn't keep yelling at the refs unless I took the course because I didn't make any sense. I wasn't yelling at them properly. I didn't know the laws of the game. So he said, either shut up or go take the class. So I wanted to keep yelling. So I took the class. And from there, it's been history. It's been kind of part of my life. I played football up to university at Division II. And, they didn't have women's professional soccer when I finished playing collegiate ball. So I said, hey, I'm not going to go anywhere playing women's professional soccer because it doesn't exist, but let me go referee the U.S. women's national team. So from then it's been a little bit of a story, real big part of my life. And, kind of my longest career, I guess, for 24 years. Yeah, 24 years.
That's an exciting journey. And I appreciate your passion for yelling at referees. So we here too also like to yell at referees every now and then. But the fact that you went out and studied so you know how to yell at referees appropriately, I think we'll take a page from your rule book there. I'll pass it over to Rahul here. He's got some questions to just clear the air really quickly. We'll start there.
Yeah. So Christina, thanks for joining us. Our interaction started a couple of days ago. And it all started when I tagged you in an Instagram story where you were explaining the elephant in the room that's here, which is the Marcos Alonso goal that was called off in the Real Madrid-Chelsea Champions League game. A lot of our followers, a lot of our friends that support Chelsea would like to understand why that goal was called off. And the ruling that basically states why that goal was called off. So I'll hand it over to you, and then we'll come back. We'll come back with some more questions to follow up.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess one thing that, kind of turned my head, because as you guys can imagine, social media world, like you can't respond / listen to everything. But the one thing that caught my attention was you guys were actually Chelsea supporters and you guys were actual Chelsea fans. And you guys were like, no, this was correct. And I was like, holy smokes, like what? Because everyone who was coming at me were Chelsea fans saying, that's not right. That's not correct. I'm like, this isn't even a question of interpretation. Is it not a subjective, should that be yellow? Should that be red? Do we have force? Right. Do we have speed? Do we have intensity? I was like, this is just black or white. It's almost like offside, right? To a certain extent. So that's what kind of caught my attention when you guys posted that. And I was like, oh, all right, look at them looking at it like at a very neutral of a view as possibly can be, with still being a fan. So I get that. And I appreciate that. And, and that was kind of one of the things that really surprised me, honestly. Like as soon as the play happened, I looked up. I mean, I'm reviewing the game. I'm reviewing the other game that was going simultaneously in Champions League because I get to comment on both. Right. And I'm sitting there like, okay, cool, no problem, moving on, right? And I think that's kind of one thing I've learned in this role is what is very obvious or very simple for us as referees, particularly even at the higher level. Although that should be a rule that every referee from grassroots up knows. It surprised me. And those things always kind of, excite me, where I'm like, oh, holy smokes, the rest of the football world either doesn't understand it or does and doesn't still like it. And those are the things that kind of catch my attention, right? Because many of you guys already know, because your heart's broken, although nobody seems to, from Chelsea side, seems to want to talk about the incorrect corner kick, but that's a different story.
I don't know what you're talking about over there.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, this beautiful game giveth and it taketh away. Yep. So however you want to chum it up, I call it the soccer gods, right? They somehow even things up somehow. But, the Alonso, it hit his hands right there. If you do a still shot, it's very hard to see. If you do kind of that, there's one angle that's really demonstrative that really reflects and shows that there is actual contact and afflection. So I've seen people, generating different different videos that aren't the best angles. And I'm like, oh, can someone just show that one that we did on Paramount Plus, where literally, or it was HQ, and I even circled it, and it was great. So kudos to that. I still got to figure out who the producer who clipped that properly. But it's very clear. And as the VAR in the booth, you'll see that it's very clear that there was actual contact. And this is one of those, nuances in the law where when we talk about handling, 95% of the time, when we talk about handling, we're talking about whether it's a deliberate handling or not, right? And so that's where the interpretation of outside the silhouette, have you made yourself bigger, right? Time, distance, all of that good stuff. Where this one is just the reverse opposite. It's an accidental handling offense. If this was 2019, this would have been a good goal. Plus we didn't have VAR back then, except for the Women's World Cup, and that was a bit of a hot mess in the beginning. So we would not have had a handling offense. This would have been a good goal. And that kind of blows people's mind, saying, well, why are we punishing this? And just to kind of retract a little bit in history, it's not too far, and not to dork out too much on you guys, but in 2020, based upon feedback, when IFAB changes the laws, they change it through a lot of feedback. Trust me, I went to an event in Nanjing, China, and the first 4 floors of that Hilton hotel, which was a beautiful Hilton hotel, the entire first floor was FIFA staff, technical staff, those who basically go and clock every single corner kick, every single throw in, every single handling offense, every single name it, right? Every single goal punt, like how much time is wasted, how many times Atletico delays the time, and then now is complaining about it, but that's a different story. But all that being said, like from a lot of that data and trial and feedback, and it's not only a year, but it's usually 2-3 years before they change a law, they got feedback from the football world saying, we don't like goals that come from anything that touches the hand. And that's where in 2020, and we're obviously not on those committees or those task force or subcommittees, but that's where that law came from. And in 2020, it was even one step stronger, where it's not just the person who directly scores or immediately scores from a handling any touching of the hand, or we would call it accidental, or at least in the football world, referee world, we call it an attacker handball. It was also a teammate. So I know we got some wonky decisions in Premier League, where in the buildup of the play and what we call the APP, or the attacking phase of play, which is where the VAR can review, you would have an accidental handling by an attacker, same thing. It jumps up, it hits their body, and then it hits their hand, which is accidental. And then it goes to a player who then puts the ball back in the net 3 passes later, and then we would call that off. And that was a travesty. So in 2021, they said, you know what, that's too harsh. The pendulum went too far. Let's just make it only when an attacker scores a goal directly or immediately after that handling offense, and that person alone. And that's how we get to this law, which then is how we get to Alonso's accidental handling that's taken away because it actually did touch his hand. So I don't really know how much more to put to that.
No, that's great background. It's great. It breaks my heart a little bit even more, because now that I know in 2019 we would be in the semifinals, not going home. But to get the history of it and to get the understanding of it is critical, because like you said, we were heartbroken in the moment. In the moment when the goal was called off, I think all 3 of us, even though we weren't watching it together, were saying a lot of things about the referee and the VAR decision. But to take the time and actually hear you explain it on Paramount Plus, which is when we interacted, I think helps us understand why it was taken off. And now that it's come back a little bit closer to the original decision, like you said, the pendulum swung back a little bit. Do we think it's going to go back again to what it was 2-3 years ago?
So it's interesting you say that. It's not up for discussion in IFAB. IFAB hasn't brought that up as a point that it would change here. Typically, they have their meetings in March and it got delayed. So that's not going to be something that changes for the 2021-2022 season. However, me digging back in and really dorking out about it and going back, and because every time they change the law, they have clarifications and explanations as to why they do it. And there's only like people like me and my friend Mark Geiger and a couple of other, and Joe Fletcher, that really like get into the detail. And we're like, oh, this is so cool. I am a dork. But one of the things, I was going back and forth with Ben Jacobs from CBS, whatever social media manager guys, and him and I were just going back in text, because he's like, I know it's the law, but it feels unfair. And I'm like, it is. And then how do we're not in IFAB. And I do truly mean that. If I could ever get on IFAB, that's great, but you have to be from one of the British football countries, which is kind of interesting that there's only like really 4 people and they're all from UK who create the law. And I'm like, wait, and then you have one FIFA representative who represents the rest of the country, the rest of the world.
The world, yeah.
yeah. When I first learned that a couple of years ago, that pretty much blew my mind. But I actually, and funny enough, I'm writing an article for it for CBS. But I actually would propose, and we couldn't do that back in 2019. Arguably in 2020, right? Or 2019, we couldn't do that because we didn't have VAR. 2020, right? We didn't know about it. Now that we're in 2021, I would love, and I would propose that, because now that we have VAR would be because in this context, right? We have the Alonso one. I don't know if you guys saw the Serie A one on Rabiot when Pellegrini took the shot, and literally Rabiot like tucks in, it makes himself really tight, and it hits like the top part of his shoulder and goes directly into the net. And that we had to take back too. And I thought that was more of a travesty than Alonso's. And it doesn't feel right or feel fair, because you take a look at the scenario as referees, as people who love the game, as people who understand the game, and say, that's not the outcome we want. So I would say now with VAR, the fact that the referee now has the opportunity to see that, because these plays are bang, bang, right? Like the Alonso one, there's a reason why Simon didn't call it. And I get it. Either he didn't see it, which easily can be explained. That's a very, very tight. 2, maybe he saw it. It didn't take a great deflection, or it didn't really alter its, moment very quick that you'd be like, I think that happened, but it kind of blinked. Like, we don't guess on those. So, but now with VAR, you can now have the referee go and take a look and say, hey, potential attacker handball, directly in it, and the VAR can flag that as one of the 4, now we can expand it to another situation, right? To go take a look at that, for the referee to understand knows the context, because he or she is right there, but at the same time to make sure there's not a secondary action, right? So if my hand's here, it hits me, it is, right? It's where we have this nice little nudge to bring it down, right? This little secondary action. The referee can now be able to appreciate that with video. So I think we might be able to bring back this attacker handling back to being subjective in the opinion of the referee. But then again, we're only talking about those leagues and those competitions that have VAR.
Right.
And we're not talking about 75% of the rest of, or 90, 80%. I don't know what number you want to put, the majority of the games that don't have VAR. So that's kind of where I think we can have a little loophole to take these back, so we don't have as harsh of a decisions as we've had over the past week. But, everything you kind of find out through trial and error when you create law is one way.
Yeah, it just happens to be at our expense this time around. But I know you brought up VAR, and I know Jackie wants to talk about that, but just to clear it up. So in this case, if Alonso passes it to someone else and they had scored, that goal would have stood.
Yep.
Okay.
The only thing the VAR would have then be looking at is whether or not Alonso deliberately handles the ball.
It. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And because he had tucked it in so tight, everyone's like, oh, it did touch his hand and he moved a little. I'm like, that's because we zoomed in and we slowed it down. Yeah. And that's where people get lost sometimes, is they zoom in and they slow it down. Like, I know we had the challenge was it yesterday yesterday with Atletico, right? And everyone's like, that was a PK. And I'm like, well, the guy touched it. And they're like, oh, there's contact. I'm like, come on, like, put it in real play. It was more of a dive than anything.
Yeah. So I'll hand it back to Jackie, because I know he wants to talk about his favorite subject, which is VAR.
Before I dive into VAR, I just want to say the way you explained that has actually brought a lot of clarity behind not only the rule, but it kind of opens up my eyes as to what goes into making the rules. And I think it gives me a deeper appreciation for how it comes about. That I think as a fan sitting at home, it's easy to scream at the television and say that's a bad call or XYZ, but just understanding the thought process and the people and the work that goes into that, it actually opens my eyes a lot. So I appreciate that. I'll jump into VAR. You mentioned a few things about VAR. I want to share my personal thoughts about VAR really quickly, and then I would like to get your personal thoughts on VAR. It's taken a bit of time, and it's now coming to the system, and I understand the reason why it's there. There are a couple of things that I've noticed. They're very slow to make decisions. I think it kind of drags out sometimes. When you look at the traditional way of refereeing, we would get decisions within a split second, and then the game would carry on. Now, I understand it's sometimes big games and things like that. It can be nerve-wracking, but that was kind of what built a little bit of the passion into the game, because you had somebody on the field controlling these two sides saying, this is how it goes, this is the way it goes. And so when it goes out and it goes for review for, I think one game we were watching with Chelsea was about 3 or 4 minutes before they came back with a review. And that was, it causes some concern to me because now I think they're going to hairline decisions, offsides. I think there was an issue a few games ago, and I know you don't watch every Chelsea game, but we're splitting toenails at this point, and that's what we can see as fans at home. And the last thing I think, at least in my opinion, is there seems to be some inconsistencies. When you watch specific games, one game a person will be called offside, in another game, and I'm not saying referees bias based on the team, but based on the play, that person's now onside. And so that's kind of where my frustrations lie. I just want to get your personal thoughts on VAR as a whole, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'm going to start on the top saying I appreciate the fact that you guys use the word VAR because that's how it's properly said. And anytime someone says VAR, I die inside or I get another gray piece of hair. And a lot of my commentator friends sometimes say VAR even after I told them that's not how to say it. And I swear this is all going to be white by the time I'm done commentating. But so I appreciate that fact. But secondly, you're kind of like me where, I mean, I was trained in VAR back in 2017 with MLS. We were the first professional league to have it. Right. I always say because we were the test tube, but they don't like to say it. They just say we're the first. I was like, we were the test babies, guys. Like, let's just be honest. Premier League's not going to try it out until they see how it works. Which funny enough, we're actually doing really good on it in MLS, but that's because we didn't pay the millions of dollars for the VAR lines for offside. So that's actually a fun fact as well. And that kind of might go to your point where you're romantic at heart, and so am I in the football game, in the sense of meaning, there's a reason we all love this game, right? We all will walk off and talk to, I'm just going to be a general and stereotype, our fellow Americans. Okay. And they're all going to be like, that game was incredible. We had a 0-0 game. It was amazing. It was passionate. It was back and forth. And the only thing they hear is 0-0. Like, how is that even a good game? Like, because all of our American sports, football, basketball, right? All of those are baseball. All of those are high scoring. Like at least our American culture doesn't understand how a 0-0 could be a beautiful game. And that's because we understand the nuances and what it takes for a team, and tactical and back and forth, and, shots on goal and the deflections and the appreciation. But also because in our game, there's times where we, as referees, like your first 15 minutes is where you establish yourself, right?
Yep.
The last 5-10 minutes before halftime is you want to go out with a good momentum, good energy, right? As much as possible. First 5, again, you tend the players go in and challenge and just try to, the last 15 minutes is always like, it's like basketball. I only watch the last minute of the game, right? It's chaos. Yep. Like basketball, I'm like, I'll watch the last minute. That's when all the fun stuff happens anyways. And everyone misses their free throws. But we love the game because it ebbs and it flows and it goes up and it goes down, and it's a storyline, and there's a villain and there's a hero. And obviously if you're in Chelsea, everyone else is the villain, including the referee, if not more so, right? That when we have that call go against us, that's just not right. Even if you feel like it's not right, or if it truly isn't right, but then you overcome that and you actually do win, like you feel 10 times bigger, $1 million. And that's where I say you're a romantic at heart in football, and so am I. And so when we had the introduction of VAR and how technical it was, and how, we are, turning this into a computer, into a robot, into officiating. And for me, refereeing is an art. It's not a science. You can't explain some of the things. Like I had a question the other day, and I should have explained it this way. I'm like, it's like faith. You can't explain it. It just is. It's football knowledge. That's what football understanding is, like our version of faith in the football world. Like you can't fully put words to it, no matter, even though I'm paid to put words to it, I try. Like you just know it deep down when you're part of the game. So when we introduced VAR, I was like, I don't like this. I mean, it is the way we're going. And as a referee, there's been plenty of laws that have come through that I'm like, I wholeheartedly disagree with, but I have to apply it because that's what IFAB has. FIFA adopted it. And in order for me to continue to officiate at a high level and not let the quote unquote game pass me by, right, I have to accept that that's the application. So even though I was against VAR initially, I had to learn it. I'm like, okay, whatever, this is where we're going. It's modern day game, modern day player, modern day referee. Let's move forward. But now I'm actually a fan of VAR, and it's more for so the fact that we as referees are the only people in that game that can change a game critical decision, or what we call KMI, a key match incident, that affects the outcome of that match. And so now in our modern day, where even before technology wasn't allowed on the sidelines, coaches weren't allowed to have technology.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have ear pods in, right? They didn't have anyone communicating from them. That was actually restricted, even though it was really hard to, really monitor and tell them no, even though you knew like coach, from Canada always had it. And I've always had to believe like Herman didn't have it and be like, okay, I didn't see that. Right. Like, I would be like, that's for the safety of the players. Right. Everyone has it. Everyone sees that you made a decision wrong. And if you're the only one who can't, you're the only one who could change it, why not provide that for us? So obviously the introduction of VAR is a little rough and we all knew it. As us in the referee world, we're like, we're not going to get this correct. Like at the highest level, it's not going to happen overnight. That's just the reality. We're going to figure out what works, what doesn't work. We're going to try to modify. We're going to keep the protocol of how we use VAR very, very tight and then figure out where we can loosen up a little bit on it. And so there are some areas of improvement still. I mean, it's still in its infancy compared to when everything else has existed. It's only been around for 5 years, like 4 years really on the international stage. So, I'm with you on that. And the times that it takes the longest, think about when it takes the longest, right? And that's where I challenge you. The times that it takes the 2 or 3 minutes, is it typically in an offside scenario where it's super, super tight? And do we have 2 or 3 other, situations that led up to that offside? So for example, when you're in the VAR booth, we say, you have to clean the APP, aka you have to check everything from the attacking phase of play, which is really the first, or the last time we go in to say it's appropriate for the ball to be moving forward into the attack, where the football world would accept the fact that we'll reverse it, right? We're not going back 5 minutes. And we say clear the APP, meaning we're looking at every potential situation. So sometimes there are complicated scenarios where possible handling, possible foul, possible red card, possible offside, ball in the back of the net. You're like, oh, shoot, right? You hit the little red button. I promise you it's red. It looks like the easy button, but it's not. As soon as you hit it, like, that you have your entire crew down there, like saying, sweet Lord, hurry up, right? You as the VAR, like assistant VAR, go check offside, go, you actually are the one with that and I actually do like semi-automatic offside. They have to set the lines. So while they're setting the lines and talking to the video operator there, sometimes you say, okay, will possible handling negate the offside so we don't have to worry about checking offside, right? You have to take it, hey, send me camera angle 1 behind the goal, send me, high line, make sure, look at this, look at this, look at this. Okay, 100% confident, because when you're in that booth, there's no excuse for getting it wrong. Literally no excuse. Like everyone's like, we paid millions of dollars for you to have 16 camera angles.
Yep. That's what it comes down to.
You only have 4 quads in your screen. You only have 4 screens. So we call it a quad, and you can make it to 2 or 1 or whatever. And then your video operator next to you has all other 16 camera angles. And, really, especially we work with Hawkeye, their camera operators or video operators are very, very good. They know the game as well too, but they also can make mistakes. But I mean, they hang out with us enough that they kind of become like sir referees, like little like sir, but like, if, for example, we miss a camera angle that was in the upper right-hand side, and usually we kind of know, hey, this reverse camera angle will be great. Behind the camera angle would really give us a better look. But if we miss one camera angle and we check in, we're like, no, we're good. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. And that first scenario, we missed that camera angle that would have negated everything else behind it. Like we're done. We're crucified. We're dead. Right. So even though there's no actual time requirement, trust me, once you hit that red button, it's green. There's a little tickler on the bottom and it's green. And then it hits like 15 seconds and it turns yellow. And then it hits 20 seconds and it turns red. And it literally feels like you're about to blow up. Like you're like in a movie and you're like racing against time and you have to get it before it hits red. But like, we literally have to go through some of those segments. So there are some times, like even me, sometimes I'll be watching a game and I'm like, dude, like, what are we doing? I was like, it's right there. Like we're good. Like, it should have been like 30 seconds. And that's just a training thing, right? The more VAR is being introduced,
fair enough,
the more leagues are doing it. Yeah, it's going to take some more time. But just ask yourself when those scenarios happen, because there might be 3 things they're checking.
I have to come off from the passionate moment that just occurred and then ask myself those questions, because that's where it gets difficult to make those decisions. But no, you did a great job answering it. And again, like I said earlier, I appreciate you going behind the scenes so we understand what you guys go through. And that little tickler timer you said, I can understand where there's pressure now to try and make a decision with these additional camera angles, but also watch the timeline. So maybe we'll cut some slack in the future for some of the referees. But I'll pass it over to Alex. We have a lot of fan questions that have come in, and I think Alex will ask you some of the questions that have come in through our Instagram page. So Alex, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so I guess to start off, this one has pretty much been touched on. Rico Otway asked, how can VAR make changes to remove human error from the equation? I think you pretty much got into that it really is just something that can't be done immediately. It has to just come with some practice, revision, trial and error, and that's just how it goes. The rules get analyzed and redone and redone. So that one, I think probably we've talked a lot about VAR. But to go to the next questions that were asked, Paul Daly, it looks like, wanted to know about immediate offside calls, which I know is one of the changes that's been implemented since the use of video assistant refereeing. And I know, obviously, you could see both sides, with some people saying, well, you've got to let them go in case they score and it is an offside, and then others saying, well, this player got clattered in a tackle and could have been injured in something that should have been easily flagged offside 10 seconds ago. So just your thoughts on that, maybe, and where the balance lies.
Yeah, I mean, there's valid points on both sides. So neither side is right, neither side's wrong. I think it's good competing interest. Where the scale is tipped in the favor of an assistant referee to delay their flag or raising the flag for offside is that, going back to, IFAB's analysis of how do we do this, is that the football world wants goals, right? The worst thing is taking a goal away. That's right. Right. We actually, and I'm trying to think, we had a couple of those today, and I'm blinking right now because there was 7 screens on my game, but it was one of the Europa games today where we had 2 offside calls that were negated for actually being valid goals. And because of football, we have very little goals in this game. Each goal means so much that's what tipped the scale to say we prefer for the assistant referee to delay the flag in a promising attacking phase, right? Sometimes I've seen it apply in other leagues or whatnot, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, for the love of God, like, just raise the flag. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're going out, right? We're not even going towards the goal. Like, this isn't a promising attack, right? And that's the key word, right? Is promising attack. Which is, or a promising attack that is evident or clear to lead to a goal scoring opportunity. That's the key. Not that just we're going forward, but it's a good goal scoring opportunity. And so, at least at the highest levels, and that's kind of always the hard part, you write a law and the law is going to be applied from all the way high, from World Cup, Champions League, Serie A, Premier League, all the way down to, I'm trying to think of when offside starts at the grassroots level. Like, let's say under 10, right? You U10 kids. How do you write a law that can be consistent throughout the entire time? And mind you, this is VAR protocol. So now let me eliminate every other league that doesn't have VAR. So now we're just talking about the VAR side of it. That level of assistant referees, and I wish I had the statistic, and I always beg Howard and Pro that they need to put that statistic out there more, is how accurate assistant referees actually are in calling offside. So like Major League Soccer, for numerous years, it was like a 97-98% accuracy rate on offside, which I'm like, if you ever ran the line, let alone ran a line at a high level, like a fast game, a U18 girls or boys game, let alone ran a high level in a semi-pro game, like, God bless your soul, right? You literally have to be in line and somehow square to the field while sidestepping, sprinting, which Corey Rockwell is one of the best at it. Like, I don't know how these people do it. I really don't. My knees are shot anyways. Like, that would be just bad news bear. I would start sprinting before the ball was kicked because I can't keep up with the second last play like that. But how good and how accurate they are is, like, my recommendation is, funny, I was talking to Luis about this, was I would recommend that we don't give as much, right? Sometimes we take a look and the person's off by 2-3 steps. And we're all like, we all kind of knew that. Like, and at that high of a level, trust me, the first thing the assistant referee tells you as the referee is, offside, delaying flag, possible offside, right? And as a referee, you know that no matter what happens, we have an offside decision on the field. The offside decision's already been made. We're just waiting for this protocol. So, unless it's super, super tight, like, I feel like we should just start flagging. And the reasoning being is because how accurate they already are at that high of a level in any of these leagues that are using VAR, that we're not going to be taking something away, really. And ultimately, also, someone made a good point. We usually don't know it's an issue because before we used to flag, it used to stop play. We never knew the ball went in the back of the net, so people aren't angry in the first place. So we're kind of creating a little bit of chaos for ourselves by delaying the flag and then taking the ball out of the back of the net, which angers people to VAR. So there's something about protecting, you know, the system and the integrity that I think we could probably raise the flag a little bit quicker on those that I think are pretty clear that are offside.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think that's an interesting thought there too, about the idea that if you only by letting the play go on have you given people the chance to get mad about the goal that was taken away. Because before, the striker stops running and throws up his hands and pretends he wasn't 10 yards off and then walks back and the ball never ends up in the net. So that's actually that's a good point there, where it is kind of in that sense a self-created issue. And I totally agree with you there too, because I think we've all probably noted, as much as I'm sure the occasional missed offside call can be annoying, I'd always remarked at the linesman thinking, especially because it's not just one player they have to watch. These forward lines could involve 3, 4, 5 attacking players sprinting forward at the same time, with defensive players stepping up to try to offside trap them. And you've got the assistant ref who somehow is like tracking all of that movement. And still, I think, as you said, that crazy high success rate, I had always thought it is really impressive how good these linesmen are at just getting these very tight calls almost always correct. So I think that's definitely an answer most football fans will be happy to hear.
Yeah, and Alex, you just triggered something on Pro's YouTube. I think there's an actual video test for that where it shows what the ARs look at, and you can take the test and it shows, like, it's not even like a game, it's a practice mode. We did it in Salt Lake City where it had people transfer and you could determine whether or not someone was offside. It's really enlightening. It's probably like Pro's biggest YouTube hit ever. I have to look at their analytics sometimes. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. We should do more of that stuff.
No, that's very interesting. I mean, that's the kind of thing I think that definitely gives people a little more appreciation for, okay, maybe this isn't as easy as it looks in slow motion on my TV at home with the nice aerial view. So I guess the next question, here's the last fan question we're going to ask, is from Matt De Silva, who is asking, why don't we have more camera angles? I guess we do have a fair number of camera angles, as you've described, but I think there maybe also relating back to the offsides, is there upcoming tech in the works that you're aware of that could treat it like goal line technology, where it's an instant decision? I mean, my like sci-fi mind thought for a second, oh, well, if you just had some kind of tracker on the players' bodies that could say this molecule of the player is offside. I don't know how far out we are from that, but are you aware of anything in the works that could streamline that?
Yeah, so your sci-fi brain is not far off. So it's already been tested in the FIFA Club World Cup. I know they changed the terminology, but it's still FIFA Club World Cup to me. The semi-automated technology that's been out there, that they've experimented with a couple of tournaments, and I do truly, they haven't come out and said it yet, I do think that the amount of money, millions of dollars they've invested in the technology and the application and having it in real life game, that it will be here for Qatar, for Qatar, however you want to say it, the Men's World Cup, that will be. And it's good to hear like some insight from some colleagues, because I've seen the system in play, but I've never used it, right? I've seen examples and trials and whatnot, but I've never actually been behind the video monitor working with the video operator during a live game. But, you know, I do actually, like, at first I was like, this is crazy. Like, basically I call it limb technology, to your point. Literally it could track limbs. And obviously there is so many more cameras that have to be added into. I don't even know how many more cameras. And it would literally have to be, all of the cameras will have to be calibrated to the players and know how to track their body angles without them wearing any kind of devices. But the technology being, one, synchronized, so it's all at the same time, which is super, like, there's like 3 main components for VAR technology and semi-automated technology, and synchronization is one of them. Because if I'm looking at one screen, it better be the exact same time frame as the other one. If not, it'll give me 2 different stories. But the semi-automated technology literally tracks limbs, body parts, fingers, toes, whatever you want to call it. And what it does and what it reduces the time is, when you as the VAR, it's actually the assistant VAR, which is typically, I'm like pointing as if there's someone next to me, which is actually an assistant referee, usually a higher level assistant referee as well. In the beginning, it was another referee. We would laugh. We're like, we got 2 referees trying to figure out offside. Good luck. But now it's assistant referees. their job primarily is to set the line with the video operator. And it's when the ball is first hit is what marks the time as where the person's body is, right? Obviously not when they receive it, yada, yada. You guys are really smart and your audience is smart. They know that. But to get to that, sometimes you have to go rock back and forth with the camera angles. Like you have to say, go 2 frames, go 1 frame back to really what we call set the line. And as soon as we do that and we get that in place and we get that set, then we make that determination. Was that person one in an offside position? If the answer is yes, then you go to a second question. Okay, they were in offside position. Did they interfere with play? Did they interfere with opponent? Did they gain an unfair advantage? There's 3 different kinds of offside. So that's where that second analysis goes. Where semi-automatic technology will go is basically immediately setting the line already for the referees and the assistant referees. So they don't have to do that work. All the assistant VAR would have to do is take a look and be like, yep, I confirm, and then we move forward. So there's no longer that communication. And I really do believe that will save about effortlessly, which sounds like nothing, except when you're watching a game or you're the VAR behind the booth, 20 to 30 seconds easily it would shave. They've done so much, testing of it already. And they say by default, it already saves about 30 seconds on those reviews. And, as soon as that AVAR confirms that is the right touch point, then, the interpretation, that second part goes into analysis, and that will save time. And I know Arsene was asking for, Arsene Wenger was asking for the technology to go immediately, like goal line technology, to the assistant referee's watch. Yeah. And then the assistant referee watch tells the referee, or it goes immediately to the referee, and then the referee just calls offside. And then I'm like, now we have no point for an assistant referee. Not really joking. They do more than just offside and in and out. But it'll be really fascinating. I'm looking forward to that, because that does save us time. And even though it's 20, 30 seconds in big TV world, in World Cup games, we always think about just the game. But from the TV side of the world, they're thinking about commercials. They're thinking about, what does this get pushed? And each commercial is hundreds and thousands of dollars. So, it's worth an investment for them. And it kind of saves us, the referees, as well, from a timing angle. So it's not official. So I'm not saying I'm speaking on behalf of anyone, but more than likely we will see semi-automated technology for sure in the Men's World Cup this year.
Yeah, I think that's certainly would probably be welcomed, I think, by most people, because when you think about goal line tech, especially, I can only think of one example, that being, I believe it was Aston Villa a season or 2 ago, who I think, do you guys remember? I believe they had goal line technology. The only time I've ever seen it mess up, the ball was technically over the line, and I think they actually stayed in the Premier League because of that. But aside from that, it's entirely really uncontroversial. And I think now that everyone knows the ref has the watch or whatever, that'll just say over the line, not over the line. There's no more arguing. There are no more ghost goals, Frank Lampard style. We know of that one. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I think definitely the theme I'm getting there is that when technology is given enough time to develop, and people are given enough time to practice and get good with it, and people have a little patience, which is sometimes a lot to ask, the improvements will come. So that's encouraging news for sure.
Patience. I love that word.
It's sometimes in short supply, I think, among soccer fans worldwide. But
well, Alex, thanks for doing the fan segment. It was really good to see some of the questions come in. I want to talk about the future state a little bit. And you've told us about your story and why you went and studied to become a referee, but just high level, how does someone go about becoming a professional referee? What's kind of the steps? What's the education they need to obtain?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll speak more towards the United States, although I could speak internationally, but at least here for the States wise is first you become a referee, right? And that sounds really kind of, I don't mean it patronizing, but sometimes it's difficult to figure out how the heck do I become a referee? And each state is responsible for the certification of its referees in its state. So I'm actually the state referee administrator for Florida. So I'm responsible for the certification of all Florida soccer referees. And so if you're from Florida, you would go to FLSRC or FSR, you would log in, you'd pay, you take the module, you become what US Soccer calls a grassroots referee. I can, debate about whether I like that name or not, but that's a different story. But that's how you would start. And same thing, if you were in Massachusetts, if you were in Southern California, North California, you would basically just Google soccer referee and your state. And it should take you, one, because I don't want to say we have a monopoly because that sounds really bad, but we're basically like, if you think of the, a US Olympic Committee or whatever, we're grandfathered as the person, the organization responsible for that. So you become certified. Now everyone's like, awesome, I got my certification. How to become a pro referee next year? You don't. What you have to do, and it's kind of like anything, like really. And when I explain this to people, it makes sense. Similar to as a player, how do I get to the national team? It's the same thing. And people don't realize that there's a path for referees. Right. And, your first couple of years, you're literally trying to figure out, how do I point for a corner? How do I point for a goal kick? Then you figure that out in the first year, the first season. Oh, cool. Now I know how to point for a corner, how to point for a goal kick. And we think we know, but when you're on the line, you're like, oh, this is different. Right. Then we start talking about the nuances. And the crazy part about the referee world is, for the most part, you cannot train to be a referee on your own. You need a game to do so. Right. And usually the game matters. Right. I always freak out, I forgot who I was telling this in NCAA. It was like a D1 coach. And I was telling him it was some recruiting thing. It was a tournament and I was there and he was there. And I was like, you do realize the way we train is a game that it matters for you. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we can't replicate that. Even when we get there's some on-field training stuff we do for FIFA, for pro, that we'll be doing here in Florida, where you bring in, 8 players, real players. And you're like, hey guys, we're going to throw the ball into the penalty area. You guys pretend to foul each other. And then as a referees, we'll show on body language, on posture, on how to deal with it. The players never really mimic. No one's going to go in 2-foot studs into the other person's ankle and break it, right? And then they all do these weird things. And you as a ref, you're like, I can't really pretend as well. I'm laughing half the time. So these games are what gets this experience. And what people don't really even know is, let me go to Champions League, for example. Many of these men that are doing these games are in their middle 40s, right? Yeah. And so to even get to some of those levels, and I don't want to dishearten anyone, because you could be a prodigy and you could just be really good at it in about 3, 4, 5 years. And this is not to be unheard of. 3, 4, 5 years, you're just a really proficient athletic wise. People forget referees are athletes, especially at the pro levels. You have to be fitter than the athlete. We have FIFA fitness tests, all that stuff. Then your application of the laws of the game. After you get a couple of those years in, you start in these pipelines. There's academies in certain places right now. Dallas Cup is going on, and there's a bunch of academies, from CONCACAF Academy to US Soccer's Academy to Pros Academy. And our network is really small. So once you start identifying where you want to go and how many years, and many of us can tell you, it's not really a year thing. You can have one really great season, and then you can have a really bad season like a player. And then you got to get back on that horse and then figure it out. So, I would say, once you really get into the pipeline, once you start advancing and becoming a regional referee and start moving up the line, which means you're getting assessments, you're passing a fitness test, you've indicated that then you become a national referee. Then pro can, identify and see you, and you don't even have to be a national referee to do some of these games. Right. We have Champions League, USL champions, right? All you have to have is pass the men's FIFA fitness test category 1, and you could be a regional referee and do those games. So, and I keep telling people if they really do want to get into the pros, we need you. So for example, my state has a little shy of 3,500 referees. In its heyday back in 2017, it used to have 6,500 referees. Wow. I need 10,000 referees today to service the game in Florida. We are having plenty of games. I was at my daughter's tournament this past weekend, and there was a U18 boys game that only had 1 assistant referee, 1 center. And I'm telling you, these people are paying silly money. I just saw a tournament on the East Coast, under 13 girls game center, $90.
Wow.
And I was like, dang, I'm going to give good I'm going to go back to refereeing. I'm going to have my daughter play over there and go make $400 today. But, that's kind of how you get through it. You get through that path line, you get through that, and if you're in a state that isn't very strong for referee or very strong for soccer or football, you find ways and you connect, kind of like social media, you connect with other people and other people that are coming up, and, you can find your way to the higher levels much, much quicker, I think, now than you could in the past. Because in the past, and I say the past, not that long ago, 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of professional soccer and or football, and we didn't have contracts, we didn't have PSRA, we didn't have any of that stuff. You couldn't make it a career. And I would tell people 5, 6 years ago, closer to 7, 8 now, don't make this your career, because you can't. And now I'm like, hey, you can actually make this a career now, which is really, really cool. And you can make over six figures doing this at the professional level. So
that's amazing. And I think that leads me to another question. And you've touched a little bit about it. I mean, being a referee is a very tough job. And I don't want to say like I'm a professional referee, but I had done some part of refereeing in intramurals back in college. And so I've played both sides of the coin. I've been a referee that's been abused, and I've been the person abusing the referee. So I know exactly what it's like. But how do we encourage more people to become referees? You said, you need 10,000 referees. What can be done to get people into it, excited about it, to become one? Because it is a tough job.
Yeah, it's a tough job. And I think, the number one thing, even when I talk to a lot of ex-players, finding that I used to referee all the time, and they were like, I don't envy you. That's the hardest job ever. I would never want to do it. And it's because I also think we focus on more of the negative in this world than we do on the positive. And, maybe that's like a life outlook sometimes, like, and it is, and don't get me wrong, we can be better. We have an issue in the referee world, from referee abuse and toxicity to, toxic culture within the referee ecosystem. I 100% acknowledge that. But what I think we never talk about is how much positive there is into this. And so, from the colleagues, right? So those who've played team sports, right? Like when I was done playing, I'd been stuck with a team since I was 10, 11, 12, right? Always playing, had my team with me, colleagues, even though, trust me, 18 girls in a small bus for 6 hours. I was about to kill all my friends because they love to sing songs and all that stuff. And I did not. I was not that person. I wasn't the team player in that regard. But, once that camaraderie is gone, like, how do you find that again? Mm-hmm. Right. And some people can find that in doing other, like you said, intramurals or playing a different sport, or maybe in your world. But for many of us who played football our lives, like, how do we get that back? And refereeing gives you that ability, because even though it's an individual sport, because it's about your performance, it really isn't. I always say, even when we take FIFA fitness tests, I just administered one for a group of referees the other day. When we finish that last lap, I'm like, you guys finish it together. I'm like sitting there yelling at them, and they'd never done it before. And back in the day, I used to do that. Everyone's like, why? I'm like, because when you enter that field, there's only 4 of you against 22 players and all the fans and everyone. I go, but when you step on that field, you guys have each other's back. You guys are going to battle together. And when you guys finish a fitness test, just like you do a field, you're all leaving together. That person who might be struggling on that 10th lap in the middle of Florida when it's 90 degrees, even though it's only 10 a.m., like, you make sure you carry that person with you through your energy. And it comes back to that teamwork and that camaraderie, that ability to connect. I always tell people, right, when we do referee education sessions and no one's getting paid that weekend to do it, and I go, there's something wrong with all of us that we're here giving up an entire weekend, not getting paid to learn the laws of the game and become better, to just keep getting yelled at. Like, there's something wrong with us, but it's okay. There's a lot of us that are here that were messed up, but like, it's just that energy level. And when you've gone to battle with someone, it's like sharing bread or like having a meal with someone. When you've gone to battle together, like, there's stories and bonds. And I loved it, because having started at 10 years old, I was working with a lot of adults. Right. Since I was between 10 to 15 years old, it was always a bunch of adults mentoring me and on the games that I had to learn with a bunch of different personalities, right? A lot of interact with people from different walks of life, friends with a bunch of people that no way in hell would I be friends with them outside of us having a connection of refereeing. Like, our lives would just, either one, we didn't live geographically close, or two, like, we just don't share the same interest, but for refereeing. So it kind of turns into this like really cool, like, community that we have, that we don't really talk much about, that I'm soon going to be revealing a little bit more of that, from the pro side of it, which is exciting. But just to show all that positivity that comes from it. And obviously I'm a little bit more into it because, like, my husband is a referee as well too, and so I met him when I was coming up as well. So for me, it was kind of a lifestyle, right? Yeah. So and although everyone asks if our 6-year-old's going to referee, I really want her to be a professional golfer instead. There's a lot more money in it, and it's really nice to hang out in the clubhouses. Like, no more porta potties at golf. Really, really nice all the time. But yeah, we just need to focus, I think, more on the positive, especially. I think someone put it really good for me as a player, even a professional player, right? And the statistics are out there. A lot of professional players, the majority, peak when they're in their early 30s. Right. As a referee, you can go on until your middle to late 40s. And, even those, and we're talking about, suburb athletes and those guys and girls who can just keep on going. Let's say your end of your career is probably late 30s, early 40s as a referee at a high level. So even though you might never have gotten on that pitch as a player, and or you just have a longer career shelf life as a referee, that you're able to stay at such a high level and play and be amongst it. Like I tell people the number of games I've been a part of, historic games from Abby Wambach beating Mia Hamm's record, like all of these things, like it's just you have the best seat in the house. And there's nothing to explain it. And when you walk into that tunnel, and they don't play the FIFA anthem anymore, but back in the day, you used to walk into that tunnel and you hear the players screaming like that, and they'd be, the energy and the echo, and you're like, I can't really interact with you guys, but like, this is freaking amazing. And you walk out and you pick up the ball and the camera's on you on your ESPN and you're leading out a team and you're knowing that you're putting on, or you're basically the director of that game to make sure that it flows and there's a passion and there's fun. And I always like to keep it just right there at sizzling, and everyone's like, you're gonna lose control. Like, no, I'm good. Everyone loves it. Like sometimes you gotta let that foul go so everyone gets spicy again. Like that was kind of how I managed the game. And it's just to be able to give that back to the game has given so much to me since I started playing the game when I was like 7-8 years old. Like that's the things we don't talk about, is just it's a beautiful game from all angles. And there's ugliness in this game, but it's more beautiful than ugly.
Very inspired me to get back to the gym to drop some pounds so I can go try out to be a referee and get fit again.
Don't focus on vanity goals. Just train like an athlete, eat like an athlete, focus on the athlete mindset. Who cares about 20 pounds? Trust me, if you're focusing on hitting your sprints, that stuff happens after. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but that stuff happens
the
after.
Encouragement there.
Focus on the athleticism. Trust me, I did 4 sets of 6 and like my legs are shot because I feel like I'm back in preseason. And I'm like, my only goal today is to not stop during the 6-minute hard sprint. So just train like an athlete. Don't worry about the vanity.
No, very, very inspirational. I really appreciate that. Rahul, I'll pass it back to you for the final question, maybe wrapping us up here.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this. I know I've been listening for the most part here, but I've enjoyed getting the insights and the background of some of the things, like Jackie and Alex were saying. We sit at home, we watch the games, and we yell at the referees, we yell at our screens. In most cases, and some of our past episodes, we've come on and said, the referee costs us the game. But understanding some of the things that you've shared with us here today, I think helps us appreciate the things that referees go through, and it's not an easy job, like we've said. So just continuing looking forward, we've spoken about technology coming in and doing more of the work. Do we see that replacing referees? And not that we want to advocate for that. Obviously, we want to see, like you said, a team of 4 there, but do we see technology doing that in the future?
It's so funny because some of us joke, especially some referees who don't like errors. And I'm like, why? They're your floaties, they're your lifelines that keep you alive. We're like with VAR and semi-automated offside and technology, would that eliminate the assistant referee? And those who say, yeah, it will, or who want it, I think they lose sight of the fact that a good assistant referee helps you keep control of the game, because you in the center, you don't have every single one of those angles. You can't cover every one of those angles. Like my favorite camera angle for a VAR / even TV is, give me the reverse camera angle behind the goal. Everyone's like, why? I'm like, because there's no referee who will ever supposed to be behind the goal. And that's where you can see that play. So, removing any kind of referees from it, the answer, I think not. I think they're going to be there because, the assistant referee, yes, we're always focused on them. And I would say it's their TV time, right? When they have offside, the flag, anytime their flag's in the air, I call that TV time for an AR. Like the TV's always going on you. Hold it proud, hold it strong. Don't look like you have any doubt, like, oh crap, I missed this. Like, you seem confident, because that's when the rest of the world cares about you at the moment. But like all of the non-physical cues and sometimes physical cues that none of you guys are aware of, or you may be aware, but the camera's not on them. But like when you're on there, are so helpful for a referee to know, hey, I'm managing the game in this style, right? So even when we talk about Daniel Server, right, with the Atletico Madrid game, right, it was the first half, he was eating his yellow cards, meaning he wasn't giving them out. And there was a couple of really hard challenges, and I was getting texts like saying, like, what's going on with this guy? And I'm like, he's trying to manage the game, but because we knew this was going to be a hard game and we knew there was going to be a lot of yellows in it. But I love the fact that knowing that he's going into that tunnel, he's going to have his wire in his ear, right? Or not in his ear. They're going to have that conversation. Like, hey, I get it. You were taking some risks, but as an assistant referee here, et cetera, like, hey, when I tell you in second half, like, like, understand that the game is already a little bit beyond and we need to bring it back. And that's where your teammates on the side are helping you. We're like, hey, Chris, like, you've let a little bit too many more like aerial challenges go, even though, you hate calling those, because that just means that person didn't get into the gym that day and they lost. Like, start calling those, because from the outside looking in, it's not looking so great, right? Like, and that's where your teammates can help you adjust in the real time. They can see that foul, like when the ball is cleared and you got the attacker and the defender just sitting there, just jawing at each other, but you have to be on the other side of the field because of a potential penalty and your AR stepping in saying, knock it off to those two. And they know there's a referee on that side. You can't replace that. So I don't think anyone's going around anytime soon. I think there might be a little bit of changes of responsibilities because of technology, but no one's leaving the field anytime soon.
And then that's good to hear, because you always, like, even the way you're just describing it, it's when you watch it on TV, you watch it as a fan, you're more focused about the team you support, but the referees are a team too. And the way you've put it has been very helpful to us. And my one final question here is, and I don't know if you support a specific team in Europe. I don't think it's Chelsea, but for this question is, who do you think is winning? Is that Leeds?
Leeds.
Oh, man.
Leeds.
Well, this question doesn't really pertain to them. I'm just kidding. But who do you think is winning the FA Cup?
I mean, to be honest, I mean, obviously Leeds is not. We're just trying not to get relegated. So, and I just want to put it on the record. I'm a Leeds fan before Jesse Marsch took over. I know Jesse Marsch. Everyone's like, oh, you're an American. You like Leeds. I'm like, no, like, I don't know if you can see, but Beals on that side.
Yeah,
and a good friend of mine is a huge Leeds fan. And I was there for the, funny enough, my first premier in-person game was Leeds versus Man United. That was incredible. And then Spurs, even though we got our tails whooped, I mean, it was still really, really cool to be in the direct. It was still really cool to be in the director's box and watch a game or two games and just feel the energy.
Yeah.
So, you get it, right, in the history, et cetera. But to go to your question, I actually, people are counting Chelsea out, and I'm not just saying because I'm on Chelsea's show, but I see you guys in the final, and you want to know why? Because of yesterday, right? Like, how do you guys come back and make that comeback, and everything that you guys are dealing with off the pitch and off, like, those are those things that make someone mentally tough that you can't replicate. So yes, there's the football that needs to be happened, but when we get into these scenarios in the playoffs, it really becomes about mental stamina. And honestly, with everything that Chelsea's going through and has gone through and continues to go through, and with your guys' manager and what they've been able to produce, like, the mental strength there is incredible. So I actually see you guys going into the final, and it's not just because I'm on this show. Whether you guys win it or not, I'm still there a little bit, but like, I think you guys have the mental strength to get into the final. But just based off of, what the boys are producing on the field, what they just produced in Champions League. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a big believer when I do March Madness here in the States for basketball. I just go based on the past 5-6 games going into that tournament, because there's something about momentum, right? You got momentum going into that final run. Like, that's going to give you more than, what you did in the beginning of the season. So all I look for is momentum, and you guys are having some really pretty good darn momentum. I mean, you got some top teams though at Premier League, so I get it, but that mental grit is probably, I think, what's going to carry you guys through.
Yeah, we certainly hope so, because like we said, Tuesday we put in the performance. We were there until the 80th minute, and then it all fell apart, and we're actually recording a second episode here. We didn't want to keep you on and have you listen to us cry about Tuesday night. But that wraps it up. We're very thankful for you joining us. It was a very insightful episode. I think I speak for the three of us and our listeners when they get to tune in. And you're welcome back at any point, maybe when Leeds end up playing Chelsea in a couple of weeks here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll stay in touch on Instagram, but I'll hand it over to Jackie and Alex for some parting thoughts before we close it out.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think I've said it the entire time through. I think this has been eye-opening. It's been enlightening. It's been very easy to criticize referees and not give them the credit that's due. And I think today's been a 180 for me. I'll be a lot more patient. I'll be a lot more understanding, but I think it's just knowledge. It's just knowledge that we've got today, which I think I really appreciate that. So thank you for sharing your thoughts today.
Yeah, definitely. The insight is very helpful. And I will say, though, at a certain point, I feel like as good as referees get, you will always have people who are just upset that their team loses or a decision goes against them. Because I was thinking, as you were mentioning the various offside or the various handball rule changes, rather, throughout the years, I was just thinking, well, I can accept that the Marcus Alonso call was right. Certainly feels a little harsh. But then I'm looking back at the FA Cup final last year. I think it was last year, right? With Leicester, where they had a handball in the buildup, and thinking, well, if that it was like a direct handball and on right before the assist, and I was thinking, okay, well now you're telling me if that was a year prior, that would have been ruled out. So I think people will always find a way to be upset when their team loses or a decision goes against them. But it's good to know that theoretically, even if we're seeing it through the lens of our teams, people are trying to keep the beautiful game beautiful. So that's definitely some good insight and perspective there.
Very cool. Thanks guys for having me. I truly appreciate it. It's always fun. I mean, though the reason I stepped out into the TV media world, because I have zero broadcasting, journalism, whatever experience, is really to kind of bridge this gap. And I know us as referees are not allowed to talk, so I'm a little controversial, but it's really to fill this gap. Because I think you can enjoy the game so much more when you truly know all the nuances of it and the beauty of it. And you're right, there's people who are just going to be angry, and that's okay. This is their outlet. I think those, for the majority of us who love this beautiful game around the world, that, you know, these conversations are tough conversations, are some of the best conversations, because I learn from you guys learn from me, and it makes me a better human and a better referee if I know what you guys are thinking as well.
Oh, one more actually little mini wild card question I just thought of is I've seen people,
bonus round.
Mostly as a joke online. I've seen
extra time.
Yeah, exactly. Extra time. I've seen people
3 minutes,
frustrated.
always 3 minutes.
Yeah, I know, it really is. I've seen people frustrated that referees have made some decisions against them, and I've seen people, I think mostly jokingly, saying, what if referees had to give a press conference manager style after the game? Do you think that could actually be a positive addition if they said, look, I was trying to manage the game in this way? Or no, you seem to be very against that.
I do. And I'm not like, I do think we can provide some type of an outlet. And so for those, certain leagues do it differently, but here, at least in pro and even in NWSL and in USL Championship, there's a pool reporter question. So they have to get their questions within like 30 minutes at the end of the game. And then the referees can either respond back with a voice memo or in writing. And we're required to do it in writing according to our things. But the only reason I say no to like that concept of the like a coach or a player press thing is because we're watching them right now. And how many times, and I'm part of the press, how many times are they looking for that, you know, what do you call those little moments?
They're trying to get the
sound bite.
Yeah,
where they're asking such a loaded question that they're like Barcelona today, they're like, you know, if Lazio is like, you guys always like call it failures and and you know, Xavi's like, no, and it's like, can you imagine us officials up there like getting just like all these loaded questions, being like and they're gonna ask a question about what happened 3 years ago when you referee these teams, and be like, see, you know, they're corrupt, and you're like, oh my god, no. So I don't see right now or anytime in the near future how, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, but at the same time, you know, where we can put the referees where there's not, I mean, go figure, we're talking about coaches, et cetera, are getting at it. How many times are head coaches and players frustrated with these press conferences because they're being asked these loaded questions and sound bites, and they're like, it's toxic. Now imagine being the referee and being put up there. Like at that point, we might as well just give you guys a stick and let us beat us, to be honest. So.
Okay, that can be kept in the realm of jokes for now then.
All right. Well, I'm certainly this weekend going to be watching and thinking about the APP and KMI. I made a note here.
APP.
Yeah, and if there's we usually throw up some stories on our Instagram when there's goals and stuff. So if there's a VAR decision this weekend, I'm certainly going to be mentioning those terms and educating our followers, because that's at the end of the day, that's what we all want to do. But that wraps it up, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Please continue to subscribe, like, and follow us at the Premier Chels on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Instagram, and on Twitter it's at Premier Chels. And as always, send us your feedback, and we will be back with a new episode. And also follow Christina on Instagram. It's Christina.uncle. Christina, I got that right. Is it correct?
Yes, that's correct. K-E-L, not C-L-E. I can't spell uncle normally. So.
Yep, U-N-K-E-L is the last name. But we will be back, and we're actually recording a second episode right now. But for now, that's it. Thank you very much, and up the Chels.